I was thinking about this this week. You know, it's amazing how we have adopted certain stereotypes in our lives. I was talking to a friend yesterday, and he came to me and he said, "Hey, Pastor, I love the stuff that you post, and I love the words that you speak sometimes. I think you have a really cool gig." I'm like, "Okay, yeah, I think I agree with you. I love my gig." And I said, "What do you make of all these things, that I share and say?" And he says, "Look, I'm not personally a God person, a faith, religion type of person. I really believe in science. I trust science." And I looked at him and I pushed back and said, "You trust science?" "Yes, I trust science," he says, "because science is never wrong." And I said, "Science is never wrong?" And I said, "Listen, just 500 years ago, I don't know that you knew this, but they believed that fire was made out of this substance called phlogiston. Did you know that? And did you know that just 500 years ago, cartographers thought that California was an island?" Well, they may be right about that one. Okay, I get that. And that if you rubbed dog urine in your face, it had anti-aging effects. Think about that. Did you know that just 500 years ago, the common belief was that just 500 years ago, that the sun revolved around the earth. So you're telling me that science is never wrong? And he didn't have a comeback, so he just walked. And just like him, so are we. We're wrong about many things because we have adopted certain stereotypes. We're wrong about people. How many people have you come across in life that you had an initial negative opinion about them just because of how they looked, just because of how they carried themselves, just because of where they were from, and just because of their socioeconomic status? And then you got to know them actually, and your perception of them completely changed. All that preconceived notion was shattered once you really got to know the person. And it works the other way as well. There are certain people that you have thought the world of, and then you really got to know them, and they were just really toxic individuals that you said, I need to stay away from these folks. I believe that we have, in many ways, also accepted and adopted certain stereotypes of God. And because you have adopted this view of a God that was taught to you or that you've seen in other people's lives and the way in which they behaved and carried themselves out, you said, I want nothing to do with that. Some of us have kept God at an arm's length because of certain stereotypes that we have had of God. And what we learn here in the Bible is that God comes into our lives and He's always inviting us to get to know Him so that these stereotypes that you may have adopted may be shattered. Not only that you would know Him, but that you would experience Him fully. We've been going through the life of the patriarchs this summer. We started with the life of Abraham. We're now in the life of his grandson, Jacob. And the passage that we're going to read today, it reflects a particular moment in Jacob's life where Jacob has this stereotype of God. Jacob is going through a very tough season in his life. As we learned in last week's sermon, he is on the run because his elder brother has vowed to kill him after he had stolen the firstborn blessing from his son. He is out chasing him, and Jacob is running away, and he has this idea of God that does not allow him to cope well with the moment in which he finds himself in his life. And it may be you today, and so I want you to see yourself today. I want you to read yourself into the story of Jacob. So will you turn with me to Genesis 28? We're going to read today verses 10 through 17. I had actually more verses for you today. We were planning on reading through verse 22, but I can refer to verse 22 later on in the sermon, just for the people that are running the slides there. We're going to do 10 to 17 today, okay? So this is what we read here in Genesis 28. Jacob left Beersheba and went toward Haran. And he came to a certain place and stayed there that night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place to sleep. And he dreamed, and behold, there was a ladder set up on earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie, I will give to you and to your offspring. Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. And in you and your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you, and I will keep you wherever you go. And I will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. This is the word of the Lord. Now, you would notice that in this last verse that we read, Jacob's opinion of God and of heaven, and we're going to use this term heaven here today as the realm of God. His opinion of God and of heaven had shifted. He said, I was wrong all along. I had no idea. My hope today as we look into this particular episode in the story of Jacob is that you would see yourself in that story, and that maybe you would go through some of the same changes that he went through in that moment in his life. Because it's only when you go through that change of perception of who God is and how God relates to you and I, can you really experience change and his power working in and through you. But in order for you to have that type of experience, two things must happen first. First, you must acknowledge your blindness of heaven, the realm of God. Then secondly, you must understand and figure out the secret of heaven. And it's only then that you will enter and experience heaven. So today, let's look at number one, our blindness. Let's acknowledge our blindness to heaven. Number two, let's talk about the secret of heaven. And then lastly, how we enter heaven by acknowledging the truths here in this text. So first, our blindness to heaven. The passage that we read starts with Jacob literally in hell. There's a literary device here right in verse 11 that tells us that. So if you go back to verse 11, this is what verse 11 says. As he is on his way to Haran from Beersheba. Beersheba is the place, just to situate ourselves once again, is the place where he grew up, where his father and his mother and his brother lived. He's leaving that place and he's going towards Haran because his mom had told him, hey, you must leave the house because your brother is out to kill you. Go to Haran. My brother, in other words, his uncle, lives there, and he will give you shelter, and he will give you work, and you can get on with your life over there, okay? So he is on this wilderness path towards Haran, and then we read in verse 11, and he came to a certain place, this is an insignificant place, and he stayed there that night because the sun had set. Here's the expression, the sun had set. The sun had set over Jacob's life. And then the text continues, taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head, and he lay down in that place to sleep. Here, when the text tells us the sun has set, it's saying to us Jacob's life in a poetic way is falling apart. The plan that he had come up with his mother in order to acquire prosperity and blessings over his life had really just backfired. And now he was utterly alone. The only person that truly loved him in his life was his mother. And when he left Beersheba, that was the last time that he saw his mother. He will die and he will never re-encounter his mother. He is utterly alone. There's no one following him. He is with no one. And he is in the middle of the wilderness, and he is vulnerable. He has nobody there protecting him. You know that back in those days, the wilderness was a very dangerous place to be, not only because of the elements, not only because of the wild animals, but there were thieves and bandits that would come alongside and rob you and take you of your possessions. And so he is here by himself, alone, in a completely vulnerable state. Are you okay? Yeah. All right. All right. All right, we're good. Still online. He is completely vulnerable. Almost fell down the steps. But he is also completely broke. The text tells us that he has nothing. And where we find that is that he ends up having to get a stone and use it as a pillow to lay his head. I mean, he didn't have a pair of socks. He didn't have a shirt or a coat that he can fold up and put on the ground so that he can lay his head. He has to pick up a rock. That's the author telling us that he is completely broke. Now, here is what's going on in his head, okay? Here is Jacob's assumption of why that is happening and why that is taking place. He believes, and I think it can be inferred from the story that's the reality. He believes that heaven is uninvolved. He believes that heaven does not care, and he actually believes that if heaven were to be involved in his life, it would never be involved in the way that he finds himself, because he feels and he carries the guilt because of what he has done. He has lied, he has cheated, he has stolen, and he thinks God is out to get him. Let me stop the sermon right here, because I believe that that's where some of you may find yourself right now in your life. You believe, number one, that heaven is uninvolved, that God does not care about you. And you believe that maybe some of the reasons why you're going through what you're going through in life is because you deserve it. You look at your past, you look at some of the things that you have done, and you're saying to yourself, how could somebody like God, a perfect being, want anything to do with someone like myself? And maybe you're here today and you live a good life and you have it all together, and you're saying to other people, unless you get your life up together, unless you bring yourself up by your bootstraps, okay? Unless you do that, you will not experience God's blessing in your life. Unless you get it all together, like me, look at me, I'm doing everything right, you will never be a receptor of God's blessings in your life. Wrong assumptions about God. And then the text tells us that as that is his mindset, that he goes to sleep and he has a vision of God. And I find this very interesting in this part of the story, because oftentimes God has to turn off the lights of our surroundings, of our present environments, in order to show us, right, what his heart is all about, what his purpose is in your life. It's the only way that sometimes he can give us a vision of the future, of where he wants us to be and who he wants us to become. He has to turn down the lights. And that's what happens here in Jacob's life. God puts him to sleep and elevates him to a place that he can have perspective. It reminds me of a recent experience with one of the pastors here at Crossbridge, Robert. I don't think Robert is here today. Put you up. Is he here today? I'm putting you on blast. Where is he? I'm putting you on blast today, brother. Putting you on blast. I didn't ask for permission, but you're that close of a friend that I can do that. But this is like Robert and I's first experience together in Brazil. Robert and I, we contract for a Christian organization that goes into global cities and figures out a way to equip leaders there so that churches can be planted and there'll be a movement of the gospel in these places. And Robert's from the DR, and he has worked in Latin America for many years. So I take Robert to São Paulo for the very first time. And I'm telling Robert, oh, this is the largest Latin American city, the most impactful and influential. And, I'm thinking that he's going to have a shock when he gets there. We're driving around this Uber, and I tell him, hey, what do you think? And he's like, doesn't feel like that big of a city. I mean, it reminds me of Santo Domingo. And I was like, okay, wait a minute. I have nothing against Santo Domingo, but Santo Domingo is not a city like São Paulo. I'm saying that to myself. I can't believe that he is. Now, I know, if you're for the DR here, I'm not, spitting on Santo Domingo by no means, but I'm saying you can't compare Santo Domingo with São Paulo. So I'm thinking, how can I get this guy to have the right perspective of the city? Because he only sees things horizontally, right? We're driving in from hood to hood and from place to place, and he has this horizontal perspective of the city. And so I have an idea. I said, tonight we're going to have dinner at this place. And so we go to this high ground. There's this high ground in the city of São Paulo, geographically speaking. It's the most elevated place. And right there on the most elevated place, they've built a building. And on top of that building, there is a restaurant. If you're from São Paulo, there's some people here from São Paulo. They know what I'm talking about. And there's a restaurant with a panoramic view of the city. So this guy's been in many, many global cities. I take him up that restaurant. When he walks in and he looks around, and he sees the magnitude of the city. Like, as far as your eyes could reach in every direction, there are skyscrapers and there's helicopter traffic going all around at night. He's like, wow, yeah, it's not like Santo Domingo. He said, he's inspired, and we have a great conversation there. But oftentimes, that's what God needs to do to us. He needs to remove us from the horizontal perspective of things, and he needs to elevate us so that we can behold. And I love how this text, I don't know if you were paying attention to this as we're reading here from verses 10 onward. The word behold repeats itself many times. Because here's what he sees. Here's the vision that God gives him. Ready? Go to verse 12. And he dreamed, and behold, that's the first behold. In the first behold, what does he see? See, this is God shattering his preconceived notions of himself. Okay? Behold, there was a ladder set up on the earth, and at the top of it, it reached to heaven. And behold, again, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. What's the first thing that he sees? And by the way, the word here, ladder, is probably not the best translation of the Hebrew term. The best translation would be a wide staircase, like a courtroom. As you're going up that courtroom, you have that wide staircase. He sees this wide staircase with thousands of angels going up and down on that staircase. And he realizes that he was wrong about heaven, because he sees that heaven is actually involved in the day-to-day matters and affairs of life in this world. Angels are God's emissaries. They take requests up and they accomplish God's will and communicate God's purposes in the world. They're out there sent by God to protect us. The Bible talks about that. They're really involved in our lives. You may not realize that, but God has camped, like we read in the book of Psalms, angels around you for your protection. Sometimes the reason why you haven't gone and experienced utter danger and you don't realize it is because God has camped angels around you. I believe that. I have a daughter. She's a rocket. I talked about her last week. And this girl gets in and out of danger all the time. Just this past week, we were in someone else's house, and she's climbing into the kitchen cabinets. Can you believe that? And she sits on one of the shelves, and she's holding, the shelf as she's sitting on it, hiding from her sister, playing a hide-and-seek game, I don't know. And then that thing collapses, and her fingers are crushed, and her pinky finger, like the nail, is split in half, right? And she's going like this, and there's blood splattered everywhere on this white tile kitchen, and she comes out completely in blood, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it looks like a crime scene, actually. I believe that her angels, at the end of the day, they go up to heavenly bar and they say, I need a drink. God, hey, Gabriel, just fill that thing up. God has kept certain angels like that around you, and you don't know, but listen, what the Bible is saying, and this is what reality ultimately is if there was like a veil here, like a curtain that you could open, that you could see the other realm, that realm is super involved with this realm. There'd be angels in this room. There'd be demons in this room that you would see. There's the presence of the living Christ. The Bible says that heaven is utterly involved with our life affairs. And many times we live life unaware of that truth and that fact. And that was the case with Jacob, and God opened the curtains and allowed him to see that heaven was involved in his life. But not only that, what else does he see? Look, go back to the text. And behold, this is now verse 13. And behold, here's the behold again. Here's a vision that he wants him to have, the new vision about heaven. And behold, the Lord stood over him or above him. Isn't that amazing? I was picturing at times what me and Beth have done once our babies are asleep in a crib. And you do that as well. You stand over your child and you pray over your child. Here's a picture of God's intimate love and care towards Jacob. He is above, he is looking over him. He is seeing that for the very first time. Up to that moment, Jacob thought that the only person that had ever watched over him was his mother. And now he can see that the creator God of the universe also and all along, not when he was doing everything right, but actually when his life was falling apart, was also watching over him. And then he has the greatest encounter and the highest moment of that experience, which is he hears God speak to him and opening up his mind about what he had thought about this God that was now watching over him. In verse 15, here's the behold again. Verse 15, behold, God is speaking to him. Now let me connect the dots here for you. I said that Jacob was utterly alone, that Jacob was in a completely vulnerable state, and that Jacob was completely broke. And God comes to him at that moment and speaks to him exactly the words that he needed to hear. See, to his loneliness, what does God say to him? I am with you. To his vulnerability, God says to him, and I will keep you. I got your back. I am your defender. I am your protector. You don't have to worry about it. I got your back. I go before you, and I'm behind you. I'm surrounding you. I am your protector. And then to his broke state, God says, and I will bring you back to this land. You thought that the plan had backfired, that you would never had or put your hands again on the inheritance of your father, but you will receive it because I will bring you back to this land. And you can look in every direction, the previous verses say. You can look at every direction, and I'm going to give it everything to you. I need to take you on a journey. I'm going to take you for a ride, but I'm going to bring you back, and I will prosper you. God says, I'm going to give you presence, I am going to give you protection, and I am going to provide for your needs and make you prosper. All the P's that we want to hear from God. And it's at that moment that Jacob's pre-notions of God, the stereotype of a God, was shattered. Maybe he was familiar with the fact that fire had come down and destroyed a city because of their sin, and he was probably expecting that, but yet God shows up to him with mercy and grace. And we come to this point here in verse 16 where he says, surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. I had no idea. That's his way of saying I had no idea that God was with me, that God was present all along, and he is committed to me. You know what a Christian is? A Christian is somebody. If you are a Christian here today, If you came to a moment in your life where you encountered faith, you know what a Christian is? A Christian is somebody that thought that God was a certain way and have had their opinions of God change because they had an encounter with God. It's somebody that has admitted, I was wrong all along about God. There was a moment in my life that I was wrong all along. Did you know that I became a pastor? I was ordained a pastor, and I was wrong about God because I still thought that it was all about the rules. I still thought that his favor was dependent upon my performance until I understood the gospel that Jesus performed on my behalf and that I can be set free from trying to earn his favor and his approval because it's already available to me, it's mine. I had to come to a moment where I said, I was wrong about God. And if you're a Christian, you have come to this moment. And maybe you're here today and you've never come to that moment, but this moment is begging you to realize that there is a possibility that you may be wrong about God and you may have a wrong stereotype built in your head about this God. And you're afraid of approaching. You're afraid of praying. You feel inadequate of coming and lifting your hands and surrendering. You feel inadequate. I'm going to be rejected. Maybe you were rejected by other people when you showed yourself in a vulnerable place in the past. And this is not the God of the Bible. This is not the God of Jacob. This is not the God of Abraham. I hope that your wrong notions of God would be shattered today. And because when it is, you begin to understand the secret of heaven. See, Jacob now is taking the first step in understanding the secret of heaven. God has put a ladder right in front of him, and he is taking the first step out of his hole towards the beautiful future, climbing the beautiful future that God has in store for him. But he has to realize that he was wrong. And so, what is the secret of heaven? The first thing that he begins to realize is that there are these ladders going in opposite directions. Okay, what do I mean by that? I need to put this story in context with the rest of the book of Genesis. So, if you go to Genesis 9, you read of humanity coming to a point and they're saying, "Hey, let's make a great name for ourselves." And what do? They build a tower towards heaven. And we all know, like you've studied history, that those were ziggurats and these are suspended gardens with steps. But the whole idea was that you built this thing with steps so that you get closer and closer to heaven. You build a stairway to heaven. And, back in those days, the people who are more reputable, they lived higher up, the ziggurats, up that tower. They climbed further steps. And the others who are less reputable lived more at the bottom. That's how it worked. And if you looked at every world's religion, that's actually what you see, right? So you go to the pyramids in Egypt, when you come close to the pyramids, there are steps up to heaven. And you go to the pyramids in Mexico City, and there are steps up to heaven because that's the principle of religion. You build a staircase towards heaven. But here, the notion is shattered. This notion is shattered because now we have a staircase that doesn't go from earth to heaven, but it goes from heaven to earth. It's in the opposite direction. And here right now, we have the greatest contrast between Christianity, the gospel, and every other religion. For every other religion, the idea is to escape this gnarly reality. Find a way to escape this gnarly reality. I mean, religions talk about when you die, this life is horrible. You're going to go to a great place. It's called heaven. Christianity works in the opposite direction. It's not about getting out of here, but it's about the life of heaven getting in here. It's not about escaping earth, but it's about colonizing earth with the life of heaven. That's what Christianity is all about. It's heaven coming down. And that's why when the Lord Jesus Christ taught us to pray in his prayer, what did he teach us to pray? May your will be done on heaven as it is on earth? No. May your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And how does the Bible end? The Bible doesn't end with us going to heaven and flying up with angel wings and watering heavenly gardens all dressed in white. That's a boring heaven. Who would want to go to a heaven like that? I don't want that heaven. The Bible ends with heaven coming down and permeating this earth, and the glory of God covering the earth as the waters, they cover the sea. That's the hope of the Christian, is that one day this world that is broken and it's imperfect, it will be completely healed and redeemed and restored into the realm of God, the ultimate realm of God among us. That's what we hope for. And Jacob realized that heaven was pursuing him, that he was not to pursue heaven, but that heaven actually stood in his pursuit. That there is a door and a portal to this heaven, that it doesn't open from the outside in, but it opens from the inside out. It only opens from the inside out. I mean, here's Jacob. He's running away. He's in crisis mode. And he's not praying to God. He's not even asking God, God, can you meet me right here, right now? He's completely removed from that possibility or reality. He is not saying, I repent now. Let me change the game here. Come and now, change the situation in my life. He's not doing any of that. He's not making any moves towards God. And God is pursuing him when he deserves punishment, when he deserves what he's going through. God is showering words of affirmation and mercy and grace over him. The door has been opened from the inside out. And that is the secret of heaven. And what I want you to realize here today is that what we do here at Crossbridge, everything that we say here, Sunday after Sunday, week after week, is not that there's these what's that you must do, because that's the ladder or the staircase of religion, right? There's the what's, but we're saying and telling you week after week, there's a who. It's not about the what, it's about the who. It's about the who. Okay, so how do we enter heaven? I understand now the mystery, the secret. How do I enter that realm? How do I enter that reality? You're saying here, Pastor, that you can't climb up, you can't get up, you can't do anything to get there, and that God is the one that actually comes down, so I just cross my arms and just wait until he comes. Is that what it is? What I want to tell you is, yes and no, because God is the one that takes initiative. But let me tell you this. This is the good news that you need to hear today, okay? That ladder, that staircase has been set permanently. See, when Jacob goes to sleep, the ladder is no longer there. But there's something that happened in history where that ladder was set, and it's permanently set. It's permanently set before anyone here, and regardless if you see it or not, it's there. See, my job and the job of the Holy Spirit that uses words and passages and all that is to allow you to see your blindness so that the scales would fall and you would see the ladder. It's in front of you. The ladder is right in front of you. What do you mean by that, Pastor? That the ladder is set in front of me. Well, hundreds of years later, the descendant of Jacob comes into the world. His name is Jesus. And Jesus begins his public ministry, and people are being impacted by him. And, the word is going around that this is possibly the Messiah. And a guy by the name of Philip, goes to his friend, a man by the name of Nathanael, and said, hey, I think I found the Messiah. And this skeptic friend of his, Nathanael, says, how can this be the Messiah? I mean, this guy is from Nazareth. That's an insignificant town. And Philip says, just come and see. Just telling you, bro, just haul along. And when he's approaching Jesus, this skeptic by the name of Nathanael, Jesus takes initiative, and Jesus says to him, here is Nathanael, a great guy. There's nothing wrong with him. And by the way, Nathanael, I saw you under the fig tree. And he's like, what? Now, the text doesn't tell us what he was doing under the fig tree, but what do Middle Eastern men in the middle of the day in an isolated place do under a fig tree? We have no idea. But Jesus knew what was happening and taking place there, and he knew that no one could have known about that, and so he is utterly shocked, and he admits that which his friend had told him. He comes to that realization point. His notions of the Messiah had been shattered, and he says, oh yeah, you are the Messiah. And he says, you believe that I'm the Messiah? You're going to see even greater things than this. And then Jesus says this to him in John 1:51. And Jesus said to Nathanael, truly, truly, I say to you, you will see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending. This is very important. On the Son of Man. Now, what is Jesus doing? Nathanael was a guy that was familiar with the Torah. He was familiar with the book of Genesis. And he knew this story, the story of Jacob. He knew the story of Jacob. And so Jesus says, you know the story of Jacob? You remember that staircase that Jacob saw that connected heaven to earth? And angels were ascending and descending on it? Jesus says, I am the staircase. He's not saying the angels are ascending and descending with the Son of Man. They're ascending and descending on the Son of Man. I am that staircase. That staircase, I am the overlap of heaven and earth. Heaven and earth kiss and meet in Jesus. And when you realize that, that begins to shatter your pre-notions that you had of God. Because now the words of Jesus, that he is the way, the truth, and the life, and that no one can come to heaven or to the Father except through me, they start to make sense. He is the overlap. He is the connecting point. He is the axis mundi that connects heaven to earth. And moreover, he is the Lord that descends on the ladder and identifies with Jacobs, with people like you and I. There's this amazing place in Matthew 8 where Jesus says, now the foxes have holes and the birds have their nests, but the Son of Man does not have a place to recline his head. He is identifying himself with this story. You're here going through a season of darkness in your life. The sun has set over you, and you think that God doesn't understand. He identifies with you. He has come down near, watching over you to live the life that you and I should have lived. And he understands all of the pain and all of the rejection and all of the poverty in every single way that you and I go through. He is the Lord that has come down, and he understands. And he is today, just like Jacob, speaking over you because he gets you, because he understands you. He is saying, hey, listen, you feel alone? I am with you. Hey, do you feel vulnerable? Hey, I am your protector. You don't have to defend yourself. You don't have to seek vengeance. I'm going to protect you. And hey, are you broke? I am your provision. See, when you understand and you realize that Jesus was actually the one that came down and he shut the door behind him, it was voluntarily. See, Jacob is going through this because he deserves it. Jesus went through that life not because he deserved it, but because he was willing so that you and I would exchange places with him and have the life of heaven. And therefore, this is what I want you to realize and understand here today, that you don't need to go to a special place. You don't need to put yourself together in order to enter and experience the life of heaven. It's precisely where you're at. It's not in spite of your pain. It's not in spite of your brokenness, but it's because of your brokenness that heaven has been made available to you, that Jesus extends you the invitation to be with him and to climb with him because he has exchanged places with you. He has given you the full rights to experience heaven. And you begin to understand this, that heaven is not a place necessarily that you go, but it's a reality that you live and you experience. I was running this morning. I love running here in Miami. You have access to so much natural beauty. I'm seeing, these trees and the mangroves and the water and the, beautiful sun shining over me, and it's warm and it's amazing. And you say, I'm in heaven. This is heaven. I'm doing something that I love. I'm doing something that I like. But what if heaven was a reality that was not around us but within us? That I can take it wherever I am at. And when I come and heaven is inside of me, my marriage begins to experience the reality of heaven. my neighborhood begins to experience the reality of heaven, because heaven is coming wherever I go, because it's something that I have encountered. It's a reality within that I have experienced, and it's only available, only possible through faith. And when you do, listen, when you answer this invitation of Jesus, of entering into the realm of heaven, which is an inward reality, man, things begin to change. Because that's the last thing we read in the text, right? Jacob wakes up, he admits, and he takes the rock that was the symbol of his brokenness, of being in the darkest the darkest moment in his life, and he takes that rock and he turns that rock into an altar. See, when the reality of heaven is a reality that you live, the rocks of pain become altars of praise in our lives. And many of you know what I'm talking about, because it was your story of pain that has become this altar of God's worship, because he met you where you were at, and it has become a place where others have encountered God as well. You have these rocks of pain in your life, relational brokenness, all sorts of crises, that when heaven permeates your life, these are no longer stones that you have seen as obstacles. They're reminders of your pain, but they're reminders of God's redemption in your life. And my desire and my prayer for you this morning is that as you experience the reality of heaven right now, that the rocks of pain in your life will become altars of praise to God. It would transform everything, that his will would be done in your life, that his will will be done in your marriage, that his will be done in your neighborhood, that his will be done in this city and in the life of this church, in your relationships, as it is in heaven. That is my desire for you. And the staircase, therefore, is set right before you. God is inviting you. Walk up. Will you bow your heads with me?